Once upon a time, Hollywood played by its own wild rules, and let's just say the censors hadn't yet crashed the party. Before the code locked the doors, filmmakers unleashed stories so outrageous they still make jaws drop and Twitter threads explode. But which of these old school shockers would get roasted or even canceled if they dropped today? Are you ready to see what your great grandparents really watched behind closed doors? Stick around, because some of these films go further than anything on your streaming queue. Babyface, 1933. Let's kick things off with the cinematic powder keg that is Babyface. If you think ambition just means working hard, Lily Powers will make you redefine the word. Picture Barbara Stanwyck as a steel-eyed survivor, using every card in her deck, including her looks, to climb the corporate ladder. But this isn't some modern girl boss fantasy. Lily is pushed into a brutal world by her own father, who exploits her from her earliest years. The film isn't shy about what she does to get ahead. Let's just say every rung on that ladder comes with a man's name attached. The studios knew they had a hand grenade on their hands. Audiences in 1933 were gobsmacked by a woman who didn't just break the rules, she torched the rule book and made a business out of the ashes. This wasn't just about risque dialogue. Babyface shows Lily navigating a world rigged against her, seducing and discarding men at every step, from the mailroom to the boardroom. For many, it was immoral incarnate. The fallout? The original cut was so bold it got banned, hacked up, and forced back to the editing room. Even the approved version sent censors into a tailspin, and it's still debated by scholars, feminists, and old movie buffs today. In an age where studios tiptoe around controversy, Babyface would have every PR manager sweating bullets and half the internet rage posting. If you want to see where Hollywood's bad girls really started, this film's the ultimate mic drop. The Divorcee, 1930. If you thought divorce is just a dull courtroom process or the stuff of daytime talk shows, The Divorcee is here to rip that notion to shreds. Imagine the shockwaves in 1930. When Norma Shearer strutted onto the screen as a woman who not only leaves her cheating husband, but also claims the right to play by the same rules as men. This was no sob story. This was a declaration of war on double standards. Shearer's character, Jerry, discovers her husband's affair and decides to even the score by having her own fling. And here's the kicker. The film doesn't punish her for it. Instead, it follows her journey as a newly single woman who's unafraid to reclaim her freedom, her dignity, and yes, her fun. In an era obsessed with purity, Jerry's open rebellion against marital hypocrisy was dynamite. Audiences were scandalized. Critics clutched their pearls. The studio braced for riots, and the censors tried to cut it down to size. Yet The Divorcee was a smash hit, sparking heated debates in movie magazines and even winning Norma Shearer an Oscar. If this movie dropped today, it would light up social media for its bad behavior and bold attitude, but back then, it was practically anarchy on film. Jerry didn't just get her divorce, she got the last laugh, and she made Hollywood history in the process. The Public Enemy, 1931. Criminals in cinema are nothing new, but The Public Enemy didn't just flirt with the dark side, it took audiences on a full-throttle joyride through the underbelly of Prohibition-era America. Imagine walking into a theater in 1931 and watching James Cagney, all swagger and sneer, bash his way up the gangster food chain. This movie didn't just hint at violence, it put it right in your face, with a rawness that left censors scrambling for smelling salts. From the infamous grapefruit in the face scene to brutal shootouts and cold-blooded betrayals, The Public Enemy was unapologetically gritty. It made no attempt to sugarcoat the reality of organized crime. Cagney's character, Tom Powers, is both repulsive and magnetic. He's not some cardboard villain, but a living, breathing product of poverty, corruption, and desperation. The film's honesty was electric and dangerous, holding a mirror up to an America torn between bootleggers and lawmen. The public response? Shock and awe. Newspapers warned parents, religious groups condemned it, and politicians started sharpening their knives for Hollywood's so-called moral decay. The movie became Exhibit A in the campaign for stricter film regulation, and you better believe the censors used it as proof that Hollywood had gone too far. If you released this today, especially with its open-ended attitude toward violence and vice, there'd be think pieces, Twitter outrage, and endless debate about glamorizing criminal life. But here's the secret. The Public Enemy didn't just offend, it revolutionized. It turned Cagney into a star, made gangster films the hottest ticket in town, and forced America to confront the ugly realities hiding just below the surface. Not bad for a movie that nearly got itself banned before the popcorn even finished popping. Blonde Crazy 1931. If you're expecting your classic rom-coms to play nice, Blonde Crazy will give you whiplash. This is James Cagney unleashed again. But instead of shootouts, you get sharp tongues, sizzling chemistry, and a heaping dose of con artistry. The setup? Cagney's a bellhop with a scheme for every guest. And Joan Blondell is the wisecracking partner who matches him zinger for zinger. Together they grift, seduce, and outwit everyone in their path, including each other. The film's not just suggestive, it's downright mischievous. The dialogue pops with double entendres, flirtation flies like confetti, and the camera lingers on things that proper movies were supposed to keep hidden. At a time when moral guardians wanted women to be demure and men to play it straight, Blonde Crazy had its female lead, just as bold, ambitious, and unscrupulous as the guy. This wasn't your grandmother's love story. Audiences lapped it up, even as critics and censors fumed. Here were characters who weren't punished for breaking the rules. In fact, their wits and audacity were celebrated. And let's talk about that ending. Instead of tying everything up with a neat moral bow, the film leaves you wondering who's conning whom and whether bad really means bad at all. If it landed today, Blonde Crazy would be labeled as glorifying hustling, subverting gender roles, and peddling irresponsible romance. But that's the point. This movie didn't care about teaching lessons. It was all about having fun and showing that sometimes the best love stories are the ones where both partners are just a little bit wicked. Millie 1931. There's Dark, and then there's Millie, a movie so bracing that it still makes viewers squirm nearly a century later. The story follows Millie, played by Helen Twelvetrees, who tries to navigate a world that's stacked against her from the start. She marries for love, but quickly discovers her husband is a serial cheater. So, in an era when women were supposed to grin and bear it, Millie packs her bags and walks out, refusing to play the victim. But this isn't a story of clean-cut independence. Millie's journey gets rough. She does what she must to provide for her daughter, including befriending wealthy men with questionable intentions. The film doesn't sugarcoat her choices or judge her. If anything, it dares you to empathize. There are moments that feel almost too raw for comfort, including the disturbing plot twist where a predatory older man takes an interest in her growing daughter. Back in 1931, audiences were stunned. Critics called it dangerously modern and warned that it might corrupt the morals of any woman daring enough to watch. Even today, some of the film's scenes land like a punch in the gut. It's not just the subject matter, infidelity, exploitation, predatory behavior. It's the way the film refuses to look away. No tidy resolutions, no easy answers. Would Millie survive a release in the age of hashtags and hot takes? Not without a firestorm, but there's something remarkable about how it forces viewers to sit with discomfort, question their judgments, and see women's struggles not as melodrama, but as real, raw battles for survival. For that alone, Millie still rattles cages. Call Her Savage 1932. If you think pre-code movies only flirted with controversy, Call Her Savage charges in and tears up the rulebook entirely. This is the Clara Bow comeback nobody saw coming, wild, defiant, and ready to scandalize anyone with a shred of decency left. Bow plays Nasa Springer, a young Texas woman whose life is a never-ending roller coaster of rebellion, heartbreak, and explosive bad decisions. She drinks, brawls, storms through relationships, and basically does everything that the censors later swore audiences should never see. But Call Her Savage doesn't just stop at suggestive themes. It plunges headfirst into taboos that would make even modern producers sweat. There are scenes where Bow, legendary for her on-screen charisma, appears in revealing attire, including an infamous no undergarments moment. And the film doesn't shy away from raw portrayals of impulsive desire, racial tensions, and even a brief BDSM sequence. Add in a groundbreaking scene set in a gay bar, something almost unthinkable for the time, and you've got a powder keg waiting to blow. NASA's journey is messy, tragic, and electrifying. She pushes back against a hypocritical society that tries to dictate her every move, but the film never paints her as a mere victim. She's flawed, angry, and unapologetically alive. When she becomes pregnant and has to fend for herself, Call Her Savage stares down themes of shame, stigma, and resilience with a frankness that's still rare in Hollywood. Predictably, the censors nearly lost their minds. Critics screamed, church groups boycotted, and the film's raw energy set the box office on fire. If Call Her Savage landed today, the Twitterverse would be divided between calling it problematic and praising it as a lost feminist classic. Either way, it's proof that Clarabout and pre-code Hollywood knew how to push every last button. Africa Speaks. 1930. Here's one that's controversial for reasons that have only grown more complicated with time. Africa Speaks isn't your typical narrative. It's a travel documentary, but not the kind that gets a glowing review from National Geographic. Directed by Walter Futter, the film follows explorer Paul L. Hoefler on a so-called adventure across the Serengeti, Congo, and Uganda, showing American audiences the untamed wilds of Africa. Sounds innocent? Not so fast. This film was a massive hit in its day, but it's hard to imagine any network touching it now without a trigger warning the size of the Hollywood sign. Why? Because Africa Speaks is a crash course in early 20th century exploitation. The film lingers on stereotypes, shows tribal customs as curiosities, and, most notoriously, features a scene where a native fights a lion, a scene widely believed to have been staged at the Los Angeles Zoo. In other words, it's sensationalism dressed up as anthropology, with more spectacle than substance. If that wasn't enough, the film's attitude toward Africa and its people is jaw-droppingly patronizing by today's standards. What passed as exotic or educational in 1930 now reads as deeply offensive and exploitative. For years, Africa Speaks was parodied, banned, or buried in film vaults, and it's now a relic of what not to do in documentary filmmaking. Would Africa Speaks survive today? Not a chance. But as a time capsule of Hollywood's most tone-deaf instincts, and a sobering reminder of how far we still have to go, it's essential viewing for anyone brave enough to face the uncomfortable past. This isn't just a movie. It's a litmus test for how much has changed, and how much still needs to. Red-Headed Woman 1932. Want to see what happens when a Hollywood icon is let off the leash? Enter Red-Headed Woman, starring the irrepressible Jean Harlow as Lil Andrews, a character who doesn't just bend the rules, she grinds them to dust under her stilettos. From the moment Harlow flashes that wicked grin, you know this movie isn't here to play it safe. Lil is a secretary with her eyes on the boss's office and his bank account. She's ruthless, seductive, and cunning, sleeping her way up the social ladder with a confidence that still feels radical. In a world where women were supposed to wait for Prince Charming, Lil's ambitions were nothing short of criminal. She seduces, manipulates, and double-crosses without a hint of guilt or remorse. What really rattled censors was that Lil never pays for her sins. She just gets richer and more powerful. The dialogue is sharper than broken glass, packed with innuendo that must have had audiences blushing in the aisles. The film openly mocks marriage, class, and propriety, with Harlow's performance gleefully turning every expectation upside down. Lil even gets away with slapping her rival across the face and dumping a champagne bottle on another. Scenes that are as shocking as they are hilarious. When Red-Headed Woman debuted, it faced immediate outrage from censors, critics, and self-appointed moral guardians. The Hays office demanded changes, but even the edited version was still considered way too hot for respectable company. If this dropped on Netflix today, it would be meme-worthy, tweet-stormed, and probably debated on talk shows for weeks. Bottom line, Lil Andrews walked so today's anti-heroes could run. And Jean Harlow proved you don't need to play nice to steal the whole damn movie. 3. On a Match 1932. If you ever need proof that pre-code Hollywood could out-melodrama any soap opera, 3 on a Match is your Exhibit A. This isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a full-blown descent into scandal, addiction, and the dark corners of American ambition. Starring Joan Blondell, Anne Dvorak, and a young Bette Davis, the film tracks the intertwined fates of three childhood friends whose lives spiral in wildly different directions. But it's Anne Dvorak's character, Vivian, who really sent censors into panic mode. She has it all: a loving husband, a son, a taste of high society, but throws it all away in a dizzying fall from grace. The film doesn't blink as it follows her through affairs, an abusive relationship, gambling dens, and ultimately a brutal addiction to substances that the code would soon ban from any screen. It's raw, desperate, and all too real. A portrait of a woman who, by 1932 standards, broke every rule in the book. But what made Three on a Match truly offensive for its time wasn't just the subject matter. It was the unfiltered, almost documentary-like way it depicted a woman's downward spiral. There's kidnapping, violence, and a notorious climactic scene that even today can make jaws drop. Pre-code Hollywood didn't just flirt with tragedy, it tackled it head-on without softening the impact. When the Hays office got their hands on this one, they wanted it shredded. Audiences were shocked. Some theaters refused to show it, and it quickly developed a reputation as one of the dirtiest films of its day. If you screened Three on a Match today, people would debate whether it's glorifying dysfunction or holding up a mirror to a society that still doesn't know how to handle its broken dreams. Either way, it's a must-see for anyone who thinks classic Hollywood was all glitz and innocence. Trouble in Paradise, 1932. Smooth, sophisticated, and downright scandalous, Trouble in Paradise is a masterclass in how to make immorality look irresistible. Director Ernst Lubitsch takes you into a world of con artists, double crosses, and bedroom games where the only real sin is getting caught. It's a romantic comedy, but don't let the label fool you. This film glides past the boundaries of what was decent, wrapping transgression in wit and style that even today feels deliciously subversive. The story follows two expert thieves who fall for each other while plotting to swindle a rich heiress. Sounds simple enough, right? Not when every line sparkles with flirtation and every scene pulses with sexual tension and playful deceit. Lubitsch's touch is light, but the innuendo is heavy. Dialogue that teases, glances that promise, and a plot that dances right up to the edge of scandal. What makes Trouble in Paradise so outrageous is that it never once judges its characters. There's no punishment for deception, no comeuppance for greed. Instead, the film celebrates cleverness, sophistication, and pleasure, thumbing its nose at the idea that morality is a must in entertainment. Audiences in 1932 were dazzled, but the moral watchdogs lost their minds, labeling the movie dangerously seductive and pressuring the studios to pull it from circulation when the code hit. Screen this one today, and you'd still see headlines about its lack of values, but you'd also see endless praise for how it lets adults be adults, bad behavior and all. In a world that sometimes feels allergic to nuance, Trouble in Paradise reminds us that not every story needs a hero. Sometimes, all you need is charm and a perfect crime. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1931. You think monster movies are just jump scares and rubber masks? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is here to prove otherwise, throwing open the doors to a world of repressed desires, twisted psychology, and some of the most shocking scenes ever to sneak past 1930 censors. Frederick March stars as the Good Doctor and his terrifying alter ego, delivering a performance so intense it's still unsettling nearly a century later. The movie dives straight into the heart of darkness, exploring not just the beast within, but all the ugly realities polite society tried to ignore. The transformation scenes alone are still legendary. No CGI, just raw acting, sweat, and makeup that makes you wince. But what really set jaws wagging were the film's underlying themes: addiction, predatory behavior, and unrestrained violence. There are moments of implied assault, drug-induced delirium, and a general air of decadence that makes the audience squirm in their seats. Critics and moral guardians erupted. Many called for the film to be banned, claiming it was too perverse, too grotesque, too psychologically damaging for the public. It didn't help that March's Mr. Hyde was less a monster than a horrifyingly plausible version of what might happen if our worst impulses ran wild. The movie got trimmed, censored, and in some places outright yanked from theaters. If released now, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde would get think pieces about trauma triggers, and debates on how much horror is too much. But the genius of the film is its refusal to offer easy answers. No one gets off clean, and even the good doctor is left broken by the end. For all its age, it's still the stuff of nightmares. Tarzan and His Mate, 1934. Think you know Tarzan? Unless you've seen the pre-code Tarzan and His Mate, you're missing the wildest and most controversial jungle adventure Hollywood ever dared to film. Johnny Weissmuller swings through the trees in his iconic loincloth, but it's Maureen O'Sullivan's Jane who steals the show and, for many, crossed a line that's still jaw-dropping even today. This film was notorious for its barely there costumes, underwater scenes with Jane swimming in what looked suspiciously like nothing at all, and an on-screen chemistry that was primal, uninhibited, and frankly, way too spicy for 1934's so-called family values. The infamous swimming sequence, featuring a body double but shot so daringly that censors nearly fainted, sent shockwaves across America. People wrote letters. The Hays office panicked. Theater owners edited reels themselves just to avoid local uproar. But it wasn't just about skin. The film presented Tarzan and Jane's relationship as an unashamed, unwed romance in the wild. No apologies, no wedding bells, no chaperones. They lived together, loved together, and showed a kind of freedom that was both liberating and, to the era's moral guardians, deeply threatening. When the code finally kicked in, scenes vanished, and this version of Tarzan went into cinematic exile. If you dropped this in theaters today, you'd have the same explosion of hot takes, think pieces, and outraged parents groups on TV. But you'd also see critics celebrating how bold, honest, and visually stunning it still is. Tarzan and His Mate proved you could make art, adventure, and controversy all at once, and it's still untamed after all these years. Night Nurse, 1931. Before there was a code, there was Barbara Stanwyck. And in Night Nurse, she goes for broke in a film that pulls zero punches. Stanwyck stars as Laura Hart, a trainee nurse who stumbles into a wealthy home where children are being systematically starved by a sadistic chauffeur played by none other than Clark Gable. You read that right. Clark Gable, before he became Hollywood royalty, is the villain here, and his performance is pure menacing dynamite. But what really made Night Nurse offensive for its time and would still cause waves today is its fearless plunge into the dark realities of abuse, class warfare, and medical neglect. The movie throws in drunken doctors, predatory men, and a plot so twisted you almost can't believe it was made in 1931. Stanwyck's character doesn't just stand by, she fights back, even pulling a gun when things get out of hand. For an era obsessed with female submission and virtue, this was radical stuff. The film was loaded with scenes of undressing, tough talk, and moral ambiguity. No one walks away unscathed, not the rich, not the poor, not the heroes or the villains. Censors wanted to cut nearly everything, but the pre-code system hadn't quite locked the doors yet, so audiences got to see a slice of Hollywood that was gritty, gutsy, and unfiltered. If Night Nurse dropped on Netflix now, you'd see a firestorm of debates about representation, child endangerment, and how far a thriller can go. But you'd also see a flood of praise for its gutsy storytelling and unflinching performances. In the end, Night Nurse proves that some films are just too tough to tame, even for the censors. So, which of these pre-code fire starters would set off the biggest uproar today? Would you dare watch them, or do you think Hollywood's gotten too soft for this kind of storytelling? Drop your thoughts and your hottest takes in the comments. We want to know which films shocked you the most, and which you think would still be banned if they hit screens now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you want more movie history that pulls no punches, let's keep the conversation scandalous.